evening. Welcome to Chit and Chat with Josey. Today we have a guest all the way from Nigeria, and I'm talking to you all from Bonn, Germany. Our guest today is Chief Femi Fani-Kayode, the former Minister of Aviation and former Minister of Tourism in Nigeria. I think he's held a lot of portfolios. But Chief, before I even go anywhere or get anywhere, I have 3 questions for you. Why do they call you voice of the voiceless?
Maybe I say things that others dare not say. No, it's an honor to be. It's an honor to be given such a title, if you like. And
Okay.
yeah, maybe because I tend to speak out. It's an honor. Yeah.
Okay. And Odom Agu. I hope I'm pronouncing this very well.
Odom Agu. You've been doing your research, yeah.
You know, when you're interviewing, yes,
yeah? It means
when you're
interviewing,
when you're interviewing someone of your portfolio, you have to do your proper research, yeah.
Oh, you've done a lot of research. Not many people know about that. Yes, tiger, like it's Igbo, and somebody with the heart of a tiger and the heart of a lion. That's why. That's what it means. And again, a lot of people tend to call me that. So it's quite an honor once again. And
okay. And Odogu Eze.
Who's been giving you all this information? Goodness me.
No, don't worry.
King of the warriors.
Yes, I know that one. I had to ask that before I say it on air. What does it mean exactly?
King of the warriors. That's what that one means. You know.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's an honor.
Is there any other that I left out that we should know?
There are so many. Ayonfe Olong. That means the beloved of the Lord. And then Ayonfe Olong, the beloved of the Lord. And then there are so many. There are so many.
Okay. And what does Precious call you?
That's a secret. Maybe we should ask her.
Yes, Precious, what do you call your husband?
Come and say. Come on. Come and say.
This is just a social platform.
She's being shy. Don't mind her. She calls me Baba Aragon, Baba Lotana.
Okay. Baba Lotana. All right, we won't ask for the bedroom names. This is
They call me another one, Akodayo, strange person. That's the Yoruba one. But there are so many, you know. But it's an honor to be recognized.
Thank you so much for honoring me. To be on my platform. I really appreciate.
My pleasure.
But before we get on,
yes, sorry.
Before we get on to serious business, who exactly is Chief Femi Fani-Kayode? Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
Well, I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, 16th October 1960. And I went to school from the age of 7. I was at school in the UK. I went to prep school there, Homewood House in Langton Green, Tunbridge Wells, Kent. From there, I went to Brighton College. And then from there, I went to a school called Harrow School, which in my view is the best school in England. And then went to Kelly College in the West Country. From there, I went to University of London, SOAS, School of Oriental and African Studies, where I did my first degree. Then I went to Cambridge University after that, where I did my second degree. My father had been to Cambridge. My grandfather was at Cambridge. All studied law. My older brother was at Cambridge, and my great-grandfather was at Durham University many years ago. After doing Cambridge, I came back to Nigeria, did the Nigerian bar. I was called to the bar, worked in my father's law firm for a number of years, which until I was made a full partner, Fani-Kayode and Shorimo. And then after that, I was there for a number of years. Then I went into politics. around 1991, thereabouts. And that's when my political career started. And I've been quite active in not just politics, but writing. I write essays on current affairs. I've been doing that for almost 20, 30 years now. I write poems, which is something that is very important to me. I love literature. I love history. These are things that I consider to be a pleasure. But I feel passionately about my country, passionate about what's going on in the country. And I've been at it, if you like, for a number of years. I went to Bible college in 1993 in Accra, Ghana. And I was there for 2 years where I did a degree in theology. And then I came back to Nigeria, joined NADECO, which was a movement to enthrone somebody called MK Abiola, who had won an election and had been, deprived of his mandate. And I joined NADECO. And unfortunately, I came back to Nigeria in 95, but I had to go back into exile because, I was one of those they wanted to arrest at that time. So I went back to Ghana, stayed in Ghana up until the year 2000, and I believe it was 2000 when I came back to Nigeria, met with President Olusegun Obasanjo around 2001, and I was with him from that point more or less every other day up until the time that we did the election in 2003. I joined his government. I was a spokesman, special assistant on public affairs, and I spoke for him. I defended him and went after his enemies. A difficult job. Did that for 3 years. Then I became Minister of Culture and Tourism. Then I was redeployed to aviation. After aviation, we left office in 2007. 2007, up to date, I've been very active in the ranks of the opposition. I've been very active in a number of areas in terms of public commentary and so on and so forth. And of course, in 2015, because you were one of those that came to Nigeria as one of the international observers, international journalists that interviewed us for the 2015 campaign when I was spokesman for President Jonathan's campaign organization. And we fought a very hard election, if you remember, at the time. And I was deeply involved in that. And then after that, of course, we lost the election, unfortunately. And virtually everything I said would happen if we lost ended up happening. And here we are 5 years later, and going through the tribulations and trials that we're going through in this country, of which there are very, very many. So that's and the last 5 years I've spent more or less, leading or being one of those that leads the opposition, the leader of the resistance, one of those that has been very vocal and very committed to ensuring that this government is kept on its toes and to ensure equity and justice in our country. And I'm also committed to ensuring that this government and this president is eventually voted out together with his party. And I've had a lot to say over that period of time.
Don't go fast. We still want to know about you. So what is your normal day like? My normal day? Well, we've been locked down for the last 1 month or so. Unfortunately, so of course, which is a real problem for the whole world, really. So normalcy there's a new norm now, which is that everything happens from home, which in a way is not too bad because I spend a lot more time with my beautiful family, my wife, my children. And of course, I have 9 children now. Five beautiful daughters and 4 very handsome sons, So, and all the older ones live abroad. But my sons are here with me, with my wife. So when you ask what my day is like, under lockdown, very quiet. And as you can imagine, spend a lot of time with the family. But before then, of course, I was very busy, always traveling over the country, always researching, always working hard and trying to make ends meet, trying to take care of my family, and also trying to my best to stand against what I believe is a tyrannous government, a government of tyranny, a government that has divided our country, and a government which I believe has actually destroyed the future of our people and our country. And that in itself is a very, very difficult task, a risky task. I've been locked up a number of times. I've been persecuted. I've suffered a lot. But, all things count for good. We count it all as joy. I'm a man of faith. I'm a man of strength. And, I'm prepared to pay any price for the truth. I'm prepared to do anything to ensure there's equity in my country, to ensure that the oppressed
are represented and spoken for, and to ensure that the right thing is done.
And speaking of COVID-19, I mean, the whole world is on standstill. The whole world, you know, is stuck because of the COVID-19, the coronavirus. Do you think Nigerian government is doing enough to try and curb the virus?
Well, you know, well, let me put it to you like this. I believe there is an element of commitment from every reasonable human being to ensure that our people are safer and to ensure that we're in a position to fight this terrible plague. But you know, if you look at the facts and statistics, it's a little bit worrying. Why do I say that? We have a country of 200 million people, and yet out of 200 million people, only 10,000 people have been tested. And that's where the problem starts. We've only had about 10,000 people, according to government figures, that have been tested for this disease. And in view of that, you have to ask yourself, you know, what really is our situation? Because 10,000 tests cannot possibly reflect the, you know, what's really going on in this country in terms of the spread of the infection. What makes it worse is that this disease, you know, 90% of the people that have this disease are asymptomatic, which means that nobody knows. Most people, 9 out of 10 people, don't even know that they have it. They show no symptoms, and yet they can still infect others in that situation. So if you look at it like that, it's a very, very complex, disturbing, and daunting task, and a very frightening situation, because most people, 9 out of 10, don't know they have it. That's if they have it. But of every 10, 9 don't know they have it. They can still spread it. And once they start spreading, it goes on and on and on. So I think the first thing that we need to do in this country, quite apart from lockdowns, quite apart from palliatives for those that don't have money to take care of their family, quite apart from all that, and I appreciate we need to do all that, the first thing is we have to get more testing done. More people have to be tested in order for us to know what we're dealing with. The more the tests, the easier it is to know how widespread this disease is, and then we really know what to do. Quite apart from that, I'm a great believer in the lockdown. I don't think it's wise to let it be lifted too early. Social distancing, ensuring that we keep ourselves clean, we sanitize, and all those things. But at the same time, in our context, in our country, you need to ensure that you also have palliatives in place. Because our people, I mean, Nigeria under Buhari has become the world's capital for poverty in the world, according to the World Bank, the IMF, and a number of others. So we need to ensure that the palliatives are there. People don't have food to eat. So you've got to do both. Even if you keep people at home, you have to make sure, when you keep people at home, you have to make sure they have food, you have to make sure they have money in their account, you have to make sure they have access to their basic needs in order for them to be able to take care of themselves and their family.
But Chief, I realize that there's also some resistance from some people in Nigeria. Even here on the comments as you're talking, I see someone say that there's no coronavirus in Nigeria, it's all propaganda. I mean, so do you think there's enough awareness for people that still believe that coronavirus doesn't exist?
There's no doubt about that. You see, look, the whole coronavirus, nobody can say there is no coronavirus. Of course there's a coronavirus. There is a virus. It's a very complex situation, a complex problem, which would take us a number of hours to really discuss in depth. But let me just say this. The fact of the matter is that most of the deaths that are caused by coronavirus are actually not caused by the virus itself, but by related diseases. In other words, underlying causes, which are provoked, and coronavirus itself acts as a catalyst for that. So what you're dealing with is a disease that takes people's lives, and they may die from different things because they're in a weakened situation, breaks down the immune system, and they begin to die like flies. And it's a very real problem. So it's real and it's there. And the way to fight it is to, one, identify what you're dealing with, two, ensure that there is social distancing, three, ensure you do have lockdowns, four, ensure that people are taken care of, and five, be very sensitive to the fact that this is an extremely dangerous thing. And my greatest fear is that, because if you look at what's going on in places like Kano in Nigeria, where literally I'm told that one person began to spread it amongst a number of others, and people people have been dying like flies there. That is the sort of template that we need to avoid, and we need to ensure must not or does not happen in this country.
And I hear that physicians have also absconded in Kano.
Indeed, they say 70% of doctors have run away from Kano. And you know, but you know, we're back to the whole issue. The whole issue is very simple. We've only tested for 10,000 people, and out of 200 million. So we don't know where we are with this disease. There have not been enough tests, and even though the government, I must say, has tried their very best, and some of the state governments have done reasonably well, but we could do a lot better, and we need to take it far more seriously than we're doing. Now, Italy, China, Spain, the UK, the United States of America, certainly Germany, where you are, I suspect have reached a peak, and things will begin to get in God. I hope I didn't lose you there.
You did a bit. You did a bit. If you can repeat that.
Okay. What I was trying to say was that we're a praying nation, and I believe strongly that we'll get through this. But we do have a lot more work to do as a people, and our government certainly has a lot more work to do. We need to take care of one another, love one another, show empathy for the suffering, and we need to ensure that where hard choices have to be made, they're made. But like I said earlier, I'm not sure if you got this, and this is the greatest concern that I have. Other countries like China, Germany, where you are, Italy, Spain, the United States, UK, they've all reached a peak with this disease. And things are going to start getting better there now. They've seen more or less the worst. I believe this.
Yes.
I'm not sure we've got there yet. If you look at what happened in Ghana, they had a good lockdown, a good system, 60,000 tests or thereabouts, same with South Africa. But the minute they lifted the lockdown in Ghana, they had about, in the space of 3 days, they had about 260 something more people infected. And that's only with a tiny, minuscule percentage of population tested. So, you know, it's a real problem. And let me also add this. I told you that 90% of the people that get this disease are asymptomatic, yet they can still spread the disease. Now, of the 10% that are symptomatic and that have it, and that it's evident that they have it, so it's just 10%, 1% of them die. So what you have is a situation whereby if the numbers are large, that 1% is a huge figure. You understand? So we need to really know what the numbers are in terms of those infected, which calls for more testing. We need to do a lot more in terms of stopping the spread. We need to fight it. And we need to understand that in Africa, we may not even have begun to see, you know, the beginning of the end of this. And we mustn't have this false sense of, you know, security that it's all over, it's come and gone. I have a sneaking suspicion that things may get pretty bad before they get better here. And I sincerely hope I'm wrong, but let's wait and see.
Yeah, but as you mentioned Africa now, you also recently expressed yourself regarding a statement made by Melinda Gates regarding the coronavirus casualties in Africa. What's your stand on that issue?
Well, again, that's a very complex issue and a complex area, because I happen to believe that one of the worst things we can do is to rely on somebody or a couple that have been associated with the whole agenda of depopulation of the world. And then we expect that couple to come up with a vaccine that will save the world from this plague. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm a realist, and I'm well-read, and I'm well-exposed, and I understand the way the world system works, and I'm smart enough to understand that it's not everything that you see. You don't, you know, it's not what you see, that's not what you get. There's a lot more to this than meets the eye. The whole issue of the virus itself, how it came about, the purpose of the virus, what is the reason, how come those that created it, and I don't believe it came from animals, I believe it had some kind of human input in terms of creation. I believe it was an affliction that was unleashed on the world from China. I also happen to believe that those that did this had a purpose, and I happen to believe, I mean, many may not share this view, I happen to believe that the real reason for this evil virus that's being spread all over the place, and those that created it knew it would be spread all over the place, is to pave the way for this super magic vaccine, which will now be applied to everybody. And that in itself will be a challenge. Now, I don't, it's an area that if we went into, it's a very deep area. But the vaccine itself, if you look at the history of vaccinations throughout Africa, throughout the world, and what they've done in many parts of Africa over the years, it raises a lot of eyebrows. Now, if you say that this whole thing was created, in other words, a problem was created, and then there's a reaction to that problem from people. Oh, we need help. People are dying. And you now say, we need help. That's the reaction. And then the very people that created the problem in the first place are the ones that now come up with a solution. It's called problem, reaction, solution. It's what you call a Hegelian dialectic. And it's well known in certain circles. I would suggest you read the works of people like David Icke and so many other people on this, and you'll find that there's far more. Now, when it comes to the Gates, the Melinda Gates and so on and so forth, she made a statement which I consider to be something that was not so much out of concern, but was a pronouncement in the realm of the spirit. It was a prophetic statement which needed to be cancelled. She said she sees lots and lots of dead bodies all over Africa. And she said this at a time when the disease was not so rampant in Africa, but was rampant everywhere else. And her husband had said a couple of years earlier that that this disease was coming. He literally predicted it. He said it would exactly what happened. He said it was going to happen, and so on and so forth. And such things, there's far more to it than meets the eye. And it's important that those of us that are believers counter such statements and say that may well be your intention. But the scripture says, who is he that saith the thing that shall cometh to pass, when the Lord God of hosts commanded it not? Africa may be vulnerable. Africa may be poor. Africa may be difficult to administer. Africa may be seen as the backwoods of the entire world, where people can be treated as guinea pigs and people can die like flies and nobody cares. But Africa still has God. And we reject that. We reject this idea that our people will die like flies, even if that is the plan and that is the agenda. We're praying people and we believe in God, and we reject that. And I believe that God will stand for us and see us through, no matter what the intentions of anybody might be. And I might add this. Those that say such things, when they're not believers, they don't believe in God. Some of these people are total atheists. You have to, and self-proclaimed atheists, and you have to understand where they're coming from, who they're working for, what their agenda is. It's when you've done the research on that and what their history is. And if you doubt what I'm saying, read what Robert Kennedy and Stone, Trump's friend, and so many other people have said about the Gates. Read what they've said about what's going on with 5G. Read what they said about what's going on with the coronavirus, its real origins. Read what they've said about what the intention is, what this vaccine intends to do, how they have what they call nanos in the vaccine, and how that will now all tie in with the end time prophecies of the Bible. Complex area, difficult for people to understand or accept. But people don't have to understand or accept it because it's going to happen anyway. But one thing I know, God will not leave us, and God is with us. And we need not fear, because he's a faithful God. Yeah. All
right. So speaking about China, you've been very vocal on the recolonization of Africa by China. Do you really think Africa can survive without the Chinese?
Of course they can. I mean, the record of the Chinese in Africa is atrocious, and they treat Africans like animals. They do that in China. That's been proved over and over again. They treat us like animals in Africa itself. They own half of Zambia now. They come in with loans, and once you can't repay those loans, they become very nasty. And it's a recolonization through, or a colonization through debt. That's what they're doing, and they're very brazen about it. They have no human rights in their own parts of the world. Therefore, they can't export anything that is possibly akin to human rights or decency. And their role in this whole coronavirus thing, at the end of the day, they're going to come out looking very, very bad, because a lot of questions are being asked about their role. So even if you love China, which is a very difficult thing for any black person or African to do, their role in the coronavirus, the way it came to pass, the way in which they manipulated the World Health Organization to ensure that the truth didn't come out for a very long time. And Trump has a very, very good point there. And by the way, I should say that Trump is one of those that I believe in strongly and that stood against this evil agenda which is unfolding in the world. And God is using it mightily. Take it or leave it, that's the truth. But Trump exposed them. And I know that when America comes out of this, and she will, when the West comes out, and she will, all of us will, China will need to prepare itself for a massive payback for the damage they've done to the world, the number of people that have died, the number of businesses that have crumbled, the economic recession and depression that's coming as a consequence of this, and the suffering that the world has seen. They will have to pay a terrible price for what they have inflicted on the world.
All right, let's now talk about Nigeria, the country that you're very passionate about, your country that you love dearly. I mean, I've spoken to you.
But you know that.
I know that. But I have one question before we dwell deep into Nigeria. When you look at President Muhammadu Buhari, what do you see as Chief Femi Fani-Kayode?
That's a very, very difficult, provocative question. But let me start by saying this. I do not hate President Buhari. I don't have hate for anybody. I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, and it is not in me to hate anybody. What I hate are the things that his government has done over the last 5 years. I have a few friends in the government because I'm a politician and I know a lot of people across party lines. But because you're my friend or associate does not mean to say that I will not call you out. If I choose to speak to you privately, I will. If I choose to speak against you publicly, I will. My position for the last 5 years is to call out this government, is to try and keep them on their toes. Why? Because I want them to do the right thing. But the more we try, the harder we try, the worse it gets. President Buhari has divided our country on ethnic and religious lines. President Buhari has introduced a Fulanization agenda in our country. President Buhari has introduced an Islamist agenda in our country. President Buhari literally are we back? Yeah. Why do I say, are we back? We're back. Why do I say that he has, yes, why do I say that he's treated with kid gloves? President Buhari has released more Boko Haram prisoners than anybody in our history. President Buhari has paid more Boko Haram terrorist ransoms than any president in our country. He has treated them with kid gloves and even reintegrated them into our armed forces, which is unspeakable. President Buhari has not taken this war against Boko Haram seriously. And President Buhari, in my view, shares some of the objectives of Boko Haram. Why do I say that? President Buhari said many years ago he wants to spread Sharia throughout Nigeria. President Buhari said an attack on Boko Haram is an attack on the north. President Buhari said Muslims should vote for only Muslims. President Buhari has said so many things like that. And members of President Buhari's governments have said similar things. Now, apart from Boko Haram, which is the number one, the first and most powerful terrorist organization in the world according to the International Terror Index, we also have the fourth most powerful terrorist organization in the world, in Nigeria. They are known as the Fulani militants, but we call them Fulani herdsmen here. President Buhari has encouraged them. President Buhari has refused to bring them to justice. President Buhari has treated them with kid gloves because he happens to be a Fulani man himself. And they have slaughtered, like Boko Haram, pillaged, slaughtered, burnt, tortured, killed children, women, all over the country for the last 5 years, as Boko Haram has done in the Northeast. Now, quite apart from that, there has been an onslaught on the Christian faith in Nigeria for the last 5 years. It is not even subtle. Churches have been burnt. Government policy has been unfair to Christians. In this country, in Nigeria, every single security agency in our country, we have 17. Every single one is headed by a northern Muslim, except for the Navy, which is headed by a southern Christian. And this is a country of 200 million people where you have you know, it's a multicultural, multi-religious, multi-ethnic country of 200 million people and meant to be a secular state. This has never happened before in our history. Quite apart from that, you look at the NNPC, which is the goose that lays the golden egg. Every single key manager, including the GMD, all the heads of key sensitive portfolios and management portfolios in the NNPC is headed by a northern Muslim. And the substantive minister is the president himself, who comes from the north, who's a Muslim. The GMD is a northern Muslim, and they control everything there. Okay? So I could go on and on and on. And quite apart from that, the way the economy has been run has been atrocious. Our country is now one of the poorest in the world, the capital of poverty throughout the world. This is a disgraceful title to have. So we are poor, we're divided, we're conflicted, we are suffering, we have very little. All the reserves we had in our foreign reserves have been spent. The president has borrowed, this government has borrowed more money than all the previous governments put together for the previous 20 years, and so on and so on. And these are verifiable facts. Now, I don't have anything against my president, but what I'll tell you is this. What he has done, knowingly or unknowingly, is to push our country to the brink. Now, let me tell you, probably the greatest disservice and greatest atrocity he has committed, or they have committed, is the fact that innocent people, quite apart from being killed by terrorists, Boko Haram, and Fulani herdsmen, and so on and so forth, ISWA, that is ISIS West Africa, all alive and well in Nigeria now. Quite apart from that, the government itself, itself has indulged in the killing of innocent IPOB members, that is members of IPOB, which is led by Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, and also Shia Muslims. They've been slaughtered in this country like flies over the last 5 years. And, you know, I ask myself that how can anybody justify this, especially in view of the history of our country? Because if you look at the history of our country, you'll find that the people from the Southeast particularly have been treated in an absolutely unacceptable manner, and it goes on till today. Marginalized, denied of virtually everything. 3 million of them were subjected to genocide in our civil war between 1967 and 1970, slaughtered like flies. No reparations, no apology, no nothing. They've been slaughtered like flies and treated like subhumans. And that has been going on for many, many years. Now, over the last 5 years, you kill their fathers, you're now killing their children for saying they want to exercise their right of self-determination and have a referendum about whether or not they want to stay in Nigeria, you know? And you go to the Southwest, where I come from, a similar story. Why? Because today we have our forests in the Southwest are flooded with Fulani herdsmen and so on. So it's not a very nice picture. Let me end with this segment with this. The middle belt of our country has been subjected to absolute terror over the last, 5 years. Again, it's the same people inflicting that terror. Those that they believe they were born to rule, those they believe that they own Nigeria, and those that believe that the rest of us are slaves. So you have a situation whereby most Nigerians don't feel as if they're first-class citizens. They feel as if they're second and third-class citizens. We are divided. They have imposed a feudal system on us. They have turned us into slaves, and we are not prepared to accept that anymore. And that is why, as each day passes, more and more people are rising up against the evil that these people have inflicted on us. Now, I've said all this. It does not mean I hate Buhari or anybody else. I do not derive pleasure in saying these things, but I mean them from the bottom of my heart, and I say them with love, out of love, and out of concern for the plight of my people in Nigeria.
But Chief, like the saying goes, all politicians are the same. If you were appointed as one of the President Buhari's ministers, would you criticize him the way you're criticizing him now?
May God forbid that I should ever take a job with a government that I believe is divisive, is sectional, has Islamist tendencies and Fulanization tendencies. I would never accept that. And let me tell you this, I have many friends on that side. President Buhari and I were relatively close. I don't have anything against him personally. If I had wanted to be with them, I would have been with them. I was with them for 9 months in 2013 or something like that. 9 miserable months. I saw them for what they were. And I told the world that these people are Islamists. These people have affiliation with Boko Haram. These people are the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. These people will destroy and divide our country. And I left them. And nobody understood it then. And I spoke out publicly. And I've been proved right. You understand me? So the idea You know, light and darkness cannot mix. Now, that does not mean to say everyone in government is bad. They're not all bad. There are moderates and there are hardliners. But a government is a government. I will fight the government that I believe is killing my people. And God forbid that I should join anybody and put blood on my hands. I'm too much of a believer for that. I fear God too much for that. And mine is to fight the evil, not to join the evil.
Speaking of God, what is your relationship like with Prophet TB Joshua? Good
man. A good man. A great man, not just a good man. He's been a blessing to my nation, a blessing to my people, a blessing to my family, a blessing to me personally, because he's just somebody that is just a good person, profoundly humble to a fault, never responds to his enemies, misunderstood by many, just like I am. And he's a blessing. I mean, if you look at what the government said, and I believe it to be true, out of every 10 foreigners that come to our country, 6 of them are coming in order to go to TB Joshua's church. And he's had a lot of trials and tribulations over the years. But apart from a few of them, well, I'll probably say nobody comes close to him in making as much of an international impact for the church and for Nigeria as he does. I mean, there's no country in the world that he hasn't touched, that he isn't welcomed, and that presidents and so on and so forth welcome him. Far more so than even here, he's appreciated, and that's to be expected. But he's a very good man, and I have nothing but admiration and respect for him. There are others too. Bishop Oyedepo is a good man, and so many others in our country, leaders of the body of Christ, who I have immense respect and affection for. And of course, I've always tried my best to stand up for the church, stand up for Christians in this country. We are led by the president of CAN, a very good man, and all of them. We're really blessed in Nigeria. Pastor Adeboye, Okonkwo, Adefarasin, Oyakilome, so many. We are blessed in this country. And for me, it's important that we all act as one and come together as one, regardless of denomination and so on and so forth, and we move forward as one. But Prophet TB Joshua is a very, very good man.
And how would you describe your relationship with Nnamdi Kanu?
He's a brother to me. We may not agree on everything, but you know, what the deep calls onto the deep. Let me put it to you like that. He's largely misunderstood by a lot of people. I got to know him when I was locked up in Kuje prison, and we spent time together there. I was in the Boko Haram section where they put me with Boko Haram prisoners, but I did have the opportunity to leave that section, go to church at the main prison, and it's at that time that I met Nnamdi Kanu, and I know him very, very well. You know, when you look into a man's eyes and you talk, you can feel the soul of that person. And I know him to be a passionate believer in the emancipation of his people. I know him to be somebody that seeks to resist evil, the evil inflicted on his people. And I know that he simply wants his people to be free. Now, I have never suspected him to be a terrorist. He's not a terrorist. He's not somebody that believes in violence. He's not somebody that has ever spoken about violence. But he's a friend. And I never deny my friends. And he's a good friend. And I wish him well. I wish him well. And I sincerely hope and pray that whatever it is he has in mind for his people comes to pass, providing it's within the law and providing that it's done in a peaceful way. I mean, why on earth would you, excuse me, deny the right of anybody to say that, look, I want to exercise my right of self-determination? It's a very simple thing. If he's not in the majority, or those that think of him and think like him are not in the majority, have a referendum. That's what's done everywhere else in the world. Have a referendum in the East. Do you want to stay or not? And let whoever wins the day win the day. And I think that's the way forward, rather than to try to suppress and demonize. Now, we may not agree on everything. We may not agree on approach. We may not agree on everything. But one thing I'll tell you is this. He's a good friend. He's a good man. I have nothing but respect, and it's a mutual thing. We have respect and admiration for one another. And I stand shoulder to shoulder with him in the sense that I believe that he has the right, or they have the right, to aspire for freedom. Every human being does. And I have other friends like that. Gani Adams in the Southwest, Asari Dokubo in the South-South, and there are so many in the Middle Belt. There are many people that are fighting for the emancipation of their various ethnic nationalities in this country, and it's to be expected. It's the right thing to do. And my belief is that if you do not accept the principle that every Nigerian is born and is equal and is equal before God, and as long as you believe that there should be slaves and masters in this country, then there can be no basis for unity in this country. But if it is that you believe that, you know, everybody's equal and that we have equal rights, and it doesn't matter what your religious faith is, it doesn't matter what your ethnic nationality is, and so on and so forth, and that you see somebody for their character and who they are, not where they come from or what their faith is. If you can enunciate and if you can espouse that philosophy, then there's hope for the future. But if you don't, and if you believe that some are born to rule and some are born to serve, believe me, Nigeria will not survive it. Nigeria won't last, if that's the case. It just cannot, and it will not. Because those behind us, the younger ones, are very vociferous, very aggressive, and very, very unhappy with what's going on. And it's not just the Southeast. There's nobody in the Southeast that can beat Nnamdi Kanu in an election today. Let me tell you that right now. If it's a free and fair election, nobody. Nobody. And if you come to the Southwest, I can tell you this: if it, you know, those that belong to what I call the I don't use the word Yoruba, but Oduduwa nationalist groups, the Anagos, we are Anagos, those of us from the Southwest, and Oduduwans. You know, those that believe in the establishment of the Republic of Oduduwa as a consequence of the injustices that our people have faced over the last 60 years in this country, in my view, are an overwhelming majority, even if they may not speak out so much. So that is where Buhari has taken us to in this country. Some will say it's a good thing. Some will say it's a bad thing. Whatever you believe, if we don't get it right, this country will explode soon. And just like President Obasanjo said, apart from the fact there's a Fulanization and Islamization agenda, quite apart from that, if we're not careful, may God forbid, and I do not pray for this, I'm not a believer in violence, I can't stand violence, I deplore it, and I will never call for it. But let us pray we never have a situation whereby, as President Obasanjo said in one of his open letters, that what happened in Rwanda ever happens in our country. We do not deserve that, we do not want that, and God forbid that ever happens here.
All right, Chief, but when you look at the few portfolios that you've held in government, as Minister of Aviation, Minister of Culture and Tourism, and I think Special Assistant also to President Obasanjo, Public Affairs, I think, what are those things that you feel like you could have done better? I mean, there's no way you can say you were perfect. You know, everybody...
Nobody's perfect. And
yes.
Certainly we could have done... Well, I'm talking about myself. Certainly I was much younger. I was much younger then. I left government in 2007 when President Obasanjo left, which was a relatively long time ago. It's about 13 years or whatever it is. I'm certainly far wiser today than I was then. But even then, I tried my very best. And I defended my first job, which was the most difficult, was to defend President Obasanjo on his policies. And luckily for me, it was an easier job than most presidential spokespeople, because he was a very good president with a very good record that pulled us back from the brink and did a lot of very positive things. And very few would dispute that. Probably one of the best we ever had in this country, if not the best. So it was an easy job to do, but of course I made a lot of enemies, because 90% of the enemies I have today I inherited, some from my father, some from President Obasanjo. And I'm quite happy with that. I'm quite happy with that, because these were good men. Now, you know, so going to the ministries that I went to, I felt that I did the very best we could. I went there to address certain specific areas, which we did, both at culture and tourism and aviation. And I'm very proud of what we did. And anybody that cares to look at the record, everybody that cares to look into what we actually achieved in those ministries and in the presidency at that time, I think would agree with me that we did a pretty good job, a damn good job, actually. And my team was very good. And I'm very proud of all that. They made all kinds of allegations against us after we left office, as is always the case in this country. For 7 years, I was prosecuted and I was acquitted. 7 years to the day from the day the whole thing started. And I wasn't surprised that it happened, because I was told it would happen, because we trod on too many toes. But I believe that if you are in government and you have power, then you use that power for the good of the people, no matter whose toes you tread on, and you do your best. And that's my belief. So we did our best, and I'm very proud of what we did, and I'm proud of what I did too.
All right, and the state of economy right now in Nigeria compared to when President Goodluck Jonathan was there?
Well, President Jonathan was a very good president. I disagreed with some of
don't
his
be
policies.
biased. Just
No. I'm telling you, I disagreed with some. Some of the things. I mean, there's some issues here and there, but by and large, he was a very good president. And when Jonathan was in power, Nigeria had the fastest growing economy on the African continent. Today, Nigeria is the world's capital in terms of poverty. It's a glaring difference. When Jonathan was in power, the country was united. You didn't talk about Christians or Muslims dominating one another. You didn't talk about Northerners or Southerners dominating the other. You didn't talk about persecution of Muslims. You didn't talk about burning of mosques. You didn't talk about using state power. You didn't speak the Ijaw language in the villa. You didn't speak that. Today, 90% of the people in the presidency, in the villa, are from the core north, and the lingua franca there is Hausa, which is unacceptable. Okay, that wasn't the case with Jonathan. It's a completely different country now, and we're a different people now. We're not united. We were united under Jonathan. You could criticize government effectively under Jonathan without any fear. You criticize this government, they lock you up. They subject you to persecution, and they humiliate you, malign you, demonize you, and so on and so forth. And we're used to that. It's part of the price you have to pay. Some have even died. Some have died, have been killed. You understand me? Some have been locked up for months on end. I have a friend, Colonel Sambo Dasuki. He was locked up for almost 4 years. I believe I'm right in saying 4 years. And then he was eventually released, and of course he's still facing all kinds of spurious charges, as we all are, simply because we oppose the government. But I'm not in the least bit bitter. I believe strongly that whatever comes your way, God has a hand in it, and what does not destroy you serves to make you stronger. And so whatever comes our way, simply because we choose to stand for truth, let it come. Let it come. You understand? We cannot be killed before our time. We cannot be jailed unless the Lord wants us to go to jail. We cannot be flawed. We cannot be destroyed. I don't think I can ever fall because I'm a man of destiny. And there are many men of destiny here. The Lord is raising up a new order of people in this country who are fearless and don't give a damn about what government can do to them. They would rather speak the truth, stand on the truth, and if necessary, die on the truth. And that is the kind of leadership that you need to change what's going on in this country. That doesn't mean I hate everybody. I don't hate anybody. But I'll fight anybody, friend or foe, if I believe that they're doing something wrong. And that's how I'm configured. And I'm not the only one. There are many, many like this who are now rising up. And they are not limited to the leadership or within the political parties. Extra political, people outside the political sphere and within the political parties are all coming together in our country now to say enough is enough.
So any political ambitions?
Well, ultimately, we'll wait and see how it goes. Let's see whether we have a country left over the next 2 or 3 years. It's very, very important that before we talk about it,
hope so much like that. Sorry? To say, have you lost so much hope like that to say, let's see if we still have a country?
I refuse to accept an illusion, and the idea that we will continue like this for the next few years or whatever it is, and nothing will happen, I think is an illusion. Everything has its limit, and everybody has their limit. And you can push people to the wall, but one day they'll fight back. And what's going on here is total subjugation, suppression. It's wickedness, it's evil, and it's unacceptable. And people are beginning to say enough is enough. And I don't see it going on for much longer. If the government was sensible, if they had a brain, if they had more moderates and fewer hardliners, what they would have done was retrace their steps and try to chart a middle course where they carry everybody along, persuade people rather than whip people, talk nicely to people, persuade people, talk to them in a gentle way, win them over, give them a reason to believe in the country once again, rather than bring the whip out and slash them. It's not the best to kill 1,000 Shia Muslims in Kaduna because they blocked a road. It's not the best to slaughter IPOB members, particularly young ones, and lock them up indefinitely. It's not the best to treat Christians like filth. It's not the best to, you know, to humiliate the people of the Southwest. It's not the best to treat the people of the South as if they're dirt. And it's not the best to turn the people of the Middle Belt into slaves. It's not the best. And if you continue to do that, and you don't recognize the fact that you're doing something that is extremely dangerous for yourself and for the whole nation, then eventually something will give. I don't want any trouble. I am not a violent man. But let me tell you, we need to work hard to ensure that Nigeria remains together. And if it is that God has willed that Nigeria will not remain together because we may be better off apart from one another, then let it be so. I'll give you a very quick analogy before we move on. If a man is living in a house and he continues to beat his wife and he rapes her, he deprives her of everything, he turns her into a slave, and he tells her that it is by divine orchestration. I have a divine right to treat you like an animal and to rape you and to steal from you and to sodomize you and to humiliate you and to impoverish you. I have that right because I was born to be on top of you. And the woman keeps saying, I want to leave, I want to leave, I want to leave. And you lock the gate and you stop her from leaving. One day she will get up and she will harm you. And she will sneak out of that gate, whether you believe it or not. And that's the situation that we're in now. Precarious situation, a dangerous situation. And I'm speaking to you now prophetically. We need to retrace our steps as a people. Southerners and Northerners, Muslims and Christians must come together and reconcile before this thing explodes in our very faces. And I pray it never happens. I don't want it to happen, but I'm telling you that enough is enough. People must be treated like human beings and not like slaves and animals.
But you're calling for unity when some people are talking of Biafra. What's your comment?
And they have what I'm talking about unity in the sense that people should treat each other, unity of humanity. Even if you choose to go and have another country, you can still be a human being. You need to be a human being wherever you are, whether you're a Biafran, whether you're a Duduan, whether you're a Nigerian. Let's first of all accept that we all have the right to be treated like human beings and to respect one another and to aspire to become whatever we want to be. And we have the right as human beings to insist on our freedom and self-determination. So it's not a contradiction. You understand me? As long as anybody feels somebody else is subhuman, then of course you will say you are subhuman, like the battered woman in the house. You have no rights. You don't have a right to aspire. You don't have a right to want to leave. You don't have a right to say you want Biafra. Now, this is philosophically, psychologically, and in every sphere of human endeavor, it's unacceptable. People have the right, when they've had enough, to say, I want to go. I want to self-determine. They have that right. It's enshrined in international law. If you want to avoid that, what you do is reach out to them, feel their pain, talk to them, and try to win them and show them love and compassion, like that woman that was beaten in the house, and say, look, I'm sorry about what I did. Let's start all over again. That's the way to do it, not to beat her all the more. Now, as long as you beat, as long as you kill, as long as you humiliate and destroy, people will say, I want to go. And you cannot then say I want to go is a crime and it is unacceptable and it is something we'll resist by force, because it will get to a point that they will say, okay, do your worst. And this time round, it won't be like it happened the last time, because the Nigeria of 1967 is very different to the Nigeria of 2020. That's the bitter truth I've just told you. I'm not advocating violence. I'm not calling for it. I don't believe in it. I'm not calling for insurrection. But what I'm telling you is that we need to tread cautiously and allow people to express themselves and allow people to exercise their right of self-determination. And if we don't want them to go, we treat them with love and compassion to win them back and give them their due. And I don't think that's too much to ask.
And is it possible for President Goodluck Jonathan, to run for office again?
Well, that question would be best put to him. I mean, anything is possible, but
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether he would be interested in that. He was a very good president. He was a gentleman. You know, you know, I criticized him a lot, and yet he never locked me up for it. He never persecuted me for it. And, you know, he was a complete, you know, the mark of a true leader is somebody that does not use his power. You know, the power that he has, he doesn't exercise it at the slightest instance. He's restrained. He's calm. He's compassionate. He's selfless. He's humble. Jonathan had all those qualities. I never really knew him well until the campaign. Once I got to know him, I felt very protective of him because I knew that this man is highly misunderstood. People said he was clueless. Far from it. This man, exceptional mind, exceptionally brilliant. You understand? He, you know, one of the most, probably the best educated president we've ever had in this country. And that brilliance and that high level of education caused him to be gentle, caused him to be kind to a fault. And a lot of people betrayed him. A lot of people used him. A lot of people were unfair to him. And, you know, every day I think about it that, you know, if only we knew what we had when Jonathan was there. And the overwhelming majority of the people that voted against him, fought, every single one of them, Obasanjo, Danjuma, Babangida, all of them at that time, the fought against Professor Wale Soyinka, Femi Falana, Sowore, all of them, Dele Momodu, all of them. They've now come round to say that we were right and they were wrong. But when we were saying this, we were subjected to all kinds of insults and so on and so forth. So Jonathan has been vindicated. Well, people make mistakes all the time. I'm not running any of these people down. They're good people. They made their choices. And, you know, God knows I've made some pretty bad choices in the past myself. But sadly, this was a fatal one. And of course, once you come in 2015 and you literally rig the election, you threaten violence if you don't win. You say you know, the baboon and the monkey, the dog and the baboon will be soaked in blood if I don't have a way. All these kind of things, which is what Buhari said. And then you get into power in 2015. I mean, it would be very difficult to get a man like that out of power 4 years later, which is what happened in 2019. Again, everything that happened in an election, I told them that we are going to end up losing, not because Atiku is less popular, but because they will not allow...
I'll need to hold you there because I want you to talk about Zimbabwe when you come back. We are running into an hour, so I will be back shortly.
I'd be delighted.
Okay, so there's no way I can... Of course, I have a few questions. I want to know what was going through your mind when you were in prison. You know, you were incarcerated, you're humiliated, you're insulted. I'm sure when you're in prison, you had deep thoughts. You thought so much about your political career. You thought about Nigeria. But obviously, I know you want to explain that. But before we go there, I'm from Zimbabwe. You know what is going on in Zimbabwe. What is your opinion? What would you say about the situation in Zimbabwe?
Well, I think it's a very complex situation, particularly today. And I would be very reluctant to say too much about a country that, in terms of modern day, that is today, what's going on today, I don't know that much about. But what I do know is the history, and the history is remarkable. And the people of Zimbabwe are remarkable people. I know what Robert Mugabe was and what he did for the dignity of the African and the black man. Whether Zimbabweans appreciate that today is a different matter, because I know there were a lot of issues before he passed on. But I remember in the days of the days of Ian Smith and the days of the resistance and the civil war, and the days of men like Joshua Nkomo and all these great men who fought for the liberation of Zimbabwe. And they were great men, powerful men, proud men who fought from the jungles, from the countryside, and took back their country and fought against Ian Smith and the white minority rule. And we will never forget that. We will never forget that. In many ways, it was harder for Mugabe than it was even for President Nelson Mandela, because Mugabe fought from the jungle and he got the country back for the black man. And it's a complex area. I won't go too deeply into. I know people feel sensitive on both sides about this, and I know the challenges that came later. But one thing I know is this, that Zimbabwe will thrive. and Zimbabwe will become the great country that she's destined to be. She's always almost played, more or less played the younger brother to South Africa, which I think is very unfair in many, many ways, because the Zimbabwean people were subjected to decades of international isolation and humiliation, subversion from Western intelligence agencies. And people were sent there to discredit you, discredit your government, and deprive you of being regarded or treated as a normal player in the international community. And yet Zimbabwe survived, and Mugabe survived for so many years. Well, what happened, and his number 2 came in and is there today. And let's hope and pray that he will keep the flag flying, human rights are respected, and the economy will begin to thrive, and people will be what I know the Zimbabwean people can. I have quite a few friends there. And like I said, interestingly, I had a few, when I was at Harrow School in the UK, I had a few white Rhodesian friends and white South African friends there. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I've seen the perspective of these people. I was at school with them, and the attitude they had towards black people was unbelievable. Of course, being a Nigerian, we're very proud, we're very tough. And in those days, Nigeria was very wealthy. So they could not muscle us or intimidate us. We intimidated them. And I remember having a fight with or breaking the jaw of one of the Oppenheimer boys, who's a quite South African family, many years ago when I was at Harrow School. And for comments he made about black people. And I remember him saying to me that, oh no, we're not referring to people like you, we're referring to the blacks in South Africa and Southern Africa. I said, no, we're all one. You know, we're all one. So I know what you've been through as a people, but we're proud of you that you're still standing, and we will go from strength to strength. But I will never be amongst those that will ever run down the history of a great man like Robert Mugabe. He inspired me immensely. He changed later on from all the reports we heard, perhaps. Fine. But those years that he was the Robert Mugabe that we all knew, I'm very proud of what he did. And he showed the white people that blacks are as good, if not better than them. And I will never forget that.
And your comment on corruption in Africa at large, I mean, almost all African governments, there's so much corruption. Is that
well? You know, I'd like to stop you there, because you see, first of all, this general demonization of Africans, which is actually perpetuated and stated more by Africans themselves than anybody else, I think is unacceptable. Yes, you have corrupt leaders in Africa. You have corrupt followers too. You also have corrupt leaders in the West, and you have corrupt followers there as well.
No, we have to talk about Africa because we are Africans. Of course, it's also...
No. The issue is that, but to say all African leaders or whatever, all Africans, the corruption in Africa, I happen to believe that there is a...
Almost.
All right, fine. Even the almost, I happen to believe that there is as much institutional corruption, and I was trained in the West. I've never been to school in Nigeria, and I went to the very best schools, and I understand the West very, very well. I actually happen to believe there's far more institutional corruption, systemic corruption in Western governments and the Western democracies than even in Africa. You know why? Because they will take money from African leaders and keep it in their banks, and they will label African leaders as corrupt, but yet they will keep the proceeds of that corruption in their banks and use it. And they've been doing that for years. They will start wars on false premises just to take somebody's oil. It has happened over and over again. It happened in the Gulf War. It has happened before then, and it will always happen. They have this, you know, colonization. Look at what they did over the years to the various colonies that they had. Millions of people killed, all their treasure taken, their people enslaved. We could go on and on and on. And you come to the modern day, the whole concept of what you call neocolonialism, which is the second slavery, which is that you lend somebody money through the international monetary institutions, which you control. They now owe you. The debt now becomes so huge. The interest is greater than even the original debt that was incurred, and you've enslaved that nation. And you have removed governments. You have imposed military governments. You have used military governments. You have funded coups. You have killed people in South America, in Africa, in Asia, Southeast Asia, for centuries, years, and decades, right up until modern times. And you tell me that you are less corrupt than us? We don't have that history of doing that.
But there might be corrupt, Chief. They might be corrupt, but but they develop their countries. In Africa, they are corrupt.
What? How? Really? Let's talk about that for a minute. How did they develop their countries? Let's look at Britain, for example. Are you aware of the fact that modern day Britain, or what is left of modern day Britain, and I love the Brits, okay? I went to school there. I love them. I love the Brits. But modern day Britain was funded and established by money garnered from slavery, money garnered from their various colonies. Much of that money, mineral resources and so on and so on, stolen, people enslaved, people killed. Look at what they did to India. Look at what they've done to wherever they went throughout the old British Empire. That was the foundation of their wealth and their power. Yes, they created a great society for their people. I have no doubt about that. But let's know where everybody's coming from. Look at Germany, where you are today. Look at the history. Let's not forget about that. That Germany, glorious Germany, great Germany, ended up causing the death of no less than almost 100 million people between 1914 up until 1945, First and Second World War. That is a historical fact. No African leader has done that. Let's talk about blood on people's hands. Leopold II of Belgium killed 10 million Africans, killed them, and he regarded Belgian Congo as his personal property. No African leader has done that. Hitler killed 6 million Jews and caused them to have 50 million people. Stalin, the great Stalin, 25 million. Chairman Mao, 25 million. We could go on. These are not Africans. My own definition of corruption is not limited to stealing money. And God knows they've done more of that than anybody else in the history of the world. Because we never had colonies. We never went to pillage other people's treasure. And we never weakened other countries to cause them to be perpetual slaves. But they shed so much blood on top of that. And we need to look at it. Now, that's history. Things are better now. And thankfully, not as bad. But they must never. I mean, let me give you an example. One of the reasons why I totally detest Buhari's government. I can never forgive President Buhari for this. I will never forgive him for what I'm about to tell you. He went to the United Kingdom, all right? And the British Prime Minister said to the Queen, in the presence of 3 officials, and it was on television, he said, Nigeria and Afghanistan are the most corrupt countries in the world, and that Nigeria is fantastically corrupt. Now, you know, people like that, I know where they come from. I know who they are. I know what they are. He was at Eton. I understand where he comes from. I think he was at Oxford, went to the wrong school and the wrong university. Should have been Harrow and Cambridge. But I know his mindset. And I can understand that coming from him. Reprehensible, racist attitude, which is unbecoming of any leader. Now, that's bad enough. But our president was asked by the British media the following day, you heard what Cameron has said about your people. He was in London. Buhari was in London. He said, what do you have to say about that? Are you going to ask for an apology? And President Buhari turned around to him in front of the whole British media and said, no, I'm not going to ask for an apology. I won't ask one. Then I said, oh, why? What, don't you think what he said was very racist, unfair on your people? He said, no, he was absolutely right. Now, that is the kind of African leader that these people that regard Africans as monkeys love. Because to them, you know, it's called indirect rule. Put in somebody that will treat his own people like filth, that will look down his own people, go to a foreign country and say, all Nigerian students and young people are idle, Nigerians are corrupt, Nigerians are useless, Nigerians are this, Africans are that. It's unacceptable. I'm very, you know, relatively close to the president of Ghana. He has 2 children with my sister. He used to be married to my sister many years ago, Nana Akufo-Addo. Brilliant mind, brilliant mind, brilliant mind, was at Oxford. Brilliant mind. Now, let me tell you what he did in contrast to our president. When Macron went to visit Accra on a state visit, the president of France, and Nana Akufo-Addo gave a speech which caused me to rise up and bless Ghana and bless Africa. And he told Macron the history of Ghana, the history of monetary institutions in the West, and how we as a people, that is Africans, have come of age. I was so proud of that. That's what an educated mind can do. That's what a true leader can do. And I resent the idea that Africans are always being kicked in the teeth by Westerners, being kicked in the teeth by the rest of the world, and being told that we're so useless. And what I can't stand is when Africans themselves mouth that, like little monkeys and apes, and actually believe it to be true. It's not true. They are no better than us. They had a greater break, a better break than us. And we have suffered ever since. They didn't give us a fair start. And they have crippled us at every point in time. But we will get there with the right leadership. I have no doubt about that. Look at what's happening in Kenya today. Look at what's happening in South Africa under the various leaders. Look at what's happening in Ghana. Look at what's happening in Senegal. These are great guys coming out doing well for their people. If they can do it, we in Nigeria will also be able to do it one day. And when Nigeria gets it right, Africa is on course. Because out of every 5 black men in the world, I believe it's 4 or so, it's 1 in 5. 1 in 5 or something like that are Nigerians. We have the majority, 200 million people. When we get it right, it changes the fortunes of the African continent, and we will get it right.
You say that one thing that President Buhari did, and you never forgive him for that. You are a Christian, and the Bible said we should forgive. You need to forgive him. Sometimes maybe he was caught up in a situation whereby he lost it, but you're a Christian, you need to forgive your president. Yes, Chief?
I will repeat it to you. The suggestion that our people are fantastically corrupt, 200 million people, is an assertion I will never forgive. And I'll pray to God about that, because you're right. As a Christian, we should be, but until you don't forgive where no remorse is shown. You see, a lot of people don't understand the scripture. I have a degree in theology. I understand the scriptures very well. You don't forgive the devil. You don't forgive somebody that shows no remorse. Now, I'm not saying Buhari is the devil. I'm just saying to you that you do not offer forgiveness for a man that it's God that does that. And God in his infinite mercy and wisdom can forgive anybody for any reason at any time. But as a human being, you don't expect me to forgive somebody that says, I am filth, I am corrupt, I am nothing, I'm below the white man, I'm below this, I'm below that, and I deserve to be where I am in life. And then that man is a leader. It really is a sad testament. And let me tell you, that's not the real Buhari. The real Buhari No, I don't mean, I'm not, I really mean what I'm saying by that. The real Buhari that we knew before, when he was military in Jos, and when he was in the military, oh my goodness, and when he fought in Chad against a Chadian rebel movement, and when he almost took the capital of Chad with Nigerian forces, I mean, that was the Buhari that we knew and we admired and we revered. He was a great soldier, a man of strength, a man of courage, a man of pride. I honestly don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. And he was so effective that the Americans had to call President Shagari at the time to say, look, this man is going to take the capital of Chad. He's moved so fast, we've seen on the satellite, with Nigerian troops, because they attacked our people on our soil, and he pushed them. And Gaddafi was backing that rebel faction Forgive
him for that. You are a Christian, and the Bible said we should forgive. You need to forgive him. Sometimes maybe he was caught up in a situation whereby he lost it, but you're a Christian, you need to forgive your president. Yes, Chief?
I will repeat it to you. The suggestion that our people are fantastically corrupt, 200 million people, is an assertion I will never forgive. And I'll pray to God about that, because you're right. As a Christian, we should be, but until you don't forgive where no remorse is shown. You see, a lot of people don't understand the scripture. I have a degree in theology. I understand the scriptures very well. You don't forgive the devil. You don't forgive somebody that shows no remorse. Now, I'm not saying Buhari is the devil. I'm just saying to you that you do not offer forgiveness for a man that it's God that does that. And God in his infinite mercy and wisdom can forgive anybody for any reason at any time. But as a human being, you don't expect me to forgive somebody that says, I am filth, I am corrupt, I am nothing, I'm below the white man, I'm below this, I'm below that, and I deserve to be where I am in life. And then that man is a leader. It really is a sad testament. And let me tell you, that's not the real Buhari. The real Buhari I don't mean, I'm not, I really mean what I'm saying by that. The real Buhari that we knew before, when he was military in Jos, and when he was in the military, oh my goodness, and when he fought in Chad against a Chadian rebel movement, and when he almost took the capital of Chad with Nigerian forces. I mean, that was the Buhari that we knew and we admired and we revered. He was a great soldier, a man of strength, a man of courage, a man of pride. I honestly don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. And he was so effective that the Americans had to call President Shagari at the time to say, look, this man is going to take the capital of Chad. He's moved so fast, we've seen on the satellite, with Nigerian troops, because they attacked our people on our soil, and he pushed them. And Gaddafi was backing that rebel faction in Chad at the time. So you had Libyan soldiers on the other side with rebel forces, rebel Chadian forces. And this man defeated them and almost took the capital. Shagari had to recall him and then send him back. And that's when they redeployed him and put him in Jos. And a few months later, he became president because there was a coup d'etat and he became head of state. That Buhari, the old Buhari, is not a man that would demean or degrade his people. What happened since then, I don't know. Whatever it is, it's unacceptable to me.
All right, let's talk about your time in prison.
Yeah, I mean, I was there like so many other people. I've been through a lot. I've seen a lot. Under Yar'Adua's government, I was detained for, I believe it was about 2 weeks or so. That was my first taste, and I was prosecuted for 7 years. I was acquitted, discharged and acquitted to the day, 7 years to the day. That was under Yar'Adua and Jonathan. Then again, the minute we did the campaign, I was told I'd be locked up. I was told they would find anything. They did the same thing to me again, charged me, locked me up. I was detained for a total of 3 months. And some of that time I was put in Kuje prison in the Boko Haram section. The section was created, built by the British. It's a very sort of secret thing, actually, you know, built by the British government. And it's like Guantanamo Bay. And that place, only Boko Haram prisoners are there. And they put me in that place. And I was there for some time. And it was a terrible experience. I was in the EFCC detention center in Lagos, in Abuja, and so on and so on. But a total of 3 months. And very unpleasant. But, you know, for me, any great leader or anybody that wants to make a difference in this country must go through these things. And I never lost my faith for 1 minute. It never weakened me. I never felt intimidated. If anything, I gave them more problems when I was inside than when I was outside. And I made it clear from the beginning, I will never change my views. I've gone too far for that. And I believe strongly in what I believe in. And God has always been faithful to me and will always be faithful to me. And it's not just that. The one that was the most painful was when they tried to arrest my wife for no good reason, and my 1-year-old son at the time, Aragon, and kept her in detained her in a bank for a number of hours and tried to arrest her and so on and so forth. And they had no reason for that. And they came out and lied, and of course we proved them wrong. They had no reason for that. So this idea, and, you know, I shouldn't complain because, you know, people have had it worse. Some were locked up for years. Some have had their relatives killed. Some themselves have been killed. So I've been really blessed that I'm alive and I'm well and I'm healthy and I'm strong. And whatever comes our way, we'll weather it. We'll fight it. But most importantly, we will never, ever, ever prostitute our principles or give up the struggle, no matter what it is. Nothing will stop us from doing that because we're fighting for a better tomorrow for our children. And that's the most important thing.
All right, so before we wrap up, if you are to meet President Muhammadu Buhari today, what are the 5 things that you would tell him? What advice would you
5.
Just 5, yes.
5, well, the first thing I'd tell him, probably the most important, is to show compassion. Show compassion and show love. Be nice, be kind. Leadership comes, leadership goes. Some of us were born into the corridors of power. I understand power. My father was deputy premier when I was of the Western region when I was born. You understand me? So I understand power. It comes and goes. And he needs to understand that people are going through a lot of pain, suffering. People are being persecuted. People are being killed. People are being humiliated. And it's not good enough to just act as if it doesn't matter. Show empathy, show love, show kindness. And most important, allow people to express themselves and achieve their aspirations. Create a better country where everybody feels loved and wanted. And if people say they want to leave, create an environment whereby people can exercise the right of self-determination, allow for referendums, devolve power from the center, stop implementing a Fulani agenda, stop attempting to Islamize the country, and be nice. And recognize the fact that this country, Nigeria, is very, very important in God's program in the end time. It's a spiritual thing. It's important. And if it is that you ruin it, it will break. And it will break under your watch. And history will not forgive you for that. People are looking for freedom and demanding it. Recognize that and let them be free. That's what I would say to him. And I'll also say, I'll end by saying this to him, that you either give us our freedom or let us perish and die. Because we will never accept the status of a second-class citizen or a slave. It's not in our genes. We will not accept it. We will not take it. And it will never happen.
Wow. Well said. Thank you so much, Chief Femi Fani-Kayode, for joining me today here on Chit and Chat with Josey. Definitely, you know, I'll always be in touch, and definitely I will call for a part 2.
Thank you very much, Josey. God be with you. Shalom. Bless you. All right. All the